So let's pick a real old doozy one. Actually, this is a good one to Walt, because actually it's a question I'd like to ask too. You quote the Johns Hopkins Institute, which you say stopped gender reassignment surgery, but they've actually restarted it. And so the simple question is, what's your comment about that?
Yeah, actually my wife and I met with Dr. Paul McHugh at Johns Hopkins on this subject, and it was totally under political pressure that they've re-engaged in doing the surgery. There has been no science to show that it's effective. It's just that the total political push is back on, and they've basically folded. That's the answer.
And Glenn, do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's interesting. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Paul McHugh had written a piece in the late 70s about just fashionableness in his profession, the psychology profession. He just pointed out all these things that have no rootedness in objectivity, and the gender thing was one of them. And so when they stopped doing it under his leadership, it was, no, we're not going to play this game. But it's exactly what Walt said. Immense public and political pressure, not from the general public, but from activists to say you must and you will do this. And they just simply folded to that. So, yeah, and to emphasize, no scientific discovery whatsoever drove that. You'd think at Johns Hopkins Medical University, you would have that.
Yeah, and one additional point is it's some indication that some people were going to withhold some of their donations to the university if they didn't do it. So there's a little bit of blackmail going on there as well.
Okay, we're going to be all over the topics just to keep it varied. Amanda, how often do you see people die in great pain or experience suffering in the lead up to death?
Oh, they're two very different questions, aren't they? Pain's interesting. It comes up a lot. And actually there's a paper out of Australia, I didn't talk a lot about research, so I'm going to this one time, that came out of Australia just in the last 2 years that looked at 19,000 people in their last week and asked them or their proxy to rank their symptoms from 0 to 10. And I can tell you 50% had 0 across the board in their last week. 50%. So I guess whether you're a cup half full or a cup half empty, that's a good thing. When you look at pain, pain just goes into a smaller and smaller percentage as you go down the ranks. So where you get to 8, 9 and 10, we're talking about something like 2%. It's tiny. Severe pain at the end of life is actually tiny. It's just the emotion, the emotive picture that people use to push. Now, that is obviously 2%. That is still people in severe pain, and that's where I would hope a referral to someone like myself would come. And we can manage most pain, and I have to say most. But as I point out, it's really a rare occurrence, and as I said in my talk, I've never got to the end of not being able to do something, whether it's actually just being there and not abandoning and being with that person. There is never nothing we can do. The other symptoms, just for your interest, also get smaller and smaller. And so when you look across the rankings of 8, 9 and 10, across all the symptoms, they're tiny percentages. Most people die well. Nature knows what it's doing. And what we're hearing is the emotive stories of people that either didn't understand what they were seeing, were suffering themselves and put that onto the person, onto their loved one, or that weren't given good enough medical care.
So could we just stay on that one? With Lucretia Seals, you were involved with that case. We looked at that case and we saw a woman who was dying. We felt compassion. We understood the fear. In the end, she actually died with great palliative care. But how did you respond to that in the submissions that you made to the court in that case? How do you respond to the fact that she may die in pain and somehow we need to take that away? How did you respond in your court submission?
It was really interesting because I would have loved to have had the opportunity to have 10 minutes with Lucretia to actually reassure her that the most likely scenario of her death would be some sort of coma. And you don't feel pain when you're in a deep coma, because that's what anaesthetic is. So she was hugely unlikely to have anything other than a peaceful death. And the problem was no one told her that. And I've just had 2 cases, a man in his 60s and a woman in her 50s with the exact same tumour as Lucretia. And they've both died very peacefully in a coma, surrounded by their family, generally in their place of their choosing. So I sort of felt such regret. 1, that she didn't hear what she needed to hear, and 2, that, it was sort of set on this path, really, by that. Yeah.
Wendy, a question came in just actually when you finished speaking, but I'm able to access it through my phone. That is, and I can relate to this, Nick asks, who are women's magazines marketed to and bought by, because they are pornographic?
One of the problems that we're seeing is that as the pornography has risen and more men have been accessing it, more and more women are also accessing it, because the things that their partner, their boyfriend, or in some cases their husband is asking for, they just don't understand, and they actually feel really inadequate to even respond. And so in an effort to actually keep their husband, partner happy, the women's magazines are more and more catering to women asking questions. So women's magazines, when I was young, were about cooking or raising children, or, some sort of innocuous question about sex. And now it's really, they talk quite openly about anal or oral and all these things in women magazines, because women are struggling to actually keep up with what the men in their lives are actually asking for.
Jane, you heard the interview with Simon Bridges. What did you think about his comments about abortion going to the Law Commission, and just the kind of, let's see what the Law Commission comes back with, because there is concern that there's a bit of an agenda going on there, and we'd hope that the politicians can see that.
Yes, I guess honestly I was quite disappointed with Simon Bridges' comments, especially as leader of the opposition. I would hope that he would have held the government and what they are attempting to do to a bit more account, and to ask a bit more questions of them. I feel like they would have asked more questions about housing, or about employment law, or about oil drilling, than he is about abortion, and not just waiting to see what the government's going to come out with. The Law Commission, true, we should wait and see what they have to say. They've been given a very direct question, a very direct path they are supposed to be doing, and as I mentioned, they haven't been given that much time to do it. So there's a lot of questions around how fair and how balanced and how good is that report going to possibly be. So I wouldn't base, if I was the leader of the opposition, I wouldn't be basing my position on abortion law reform on waiting to see what they have to say.
Walt, in the United States, you are the opposition voice, I guess you could say, to Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner.
Bruce.
And I put out a media release, like I know for a fact that if I put out a media advisory saying that Caitlyn Jenner was in the country, I would be swamped with phone calls. She'd be on The Project, she'd be on 7 Sharp, she'd be on the news, she'd be on Radio New Zealand, she'd be all over the media, right? You were on Radio Live with Mark Sainsbury, and then they had 2 women on straight after you who completely bagged you. One media interview. Now, please don't take it personally, and I'm happy to give you a hug after this to console you that the media did not want to talk to you. But it raises a really interesting question. Why don't the media want to talk to you?
Well, I'm actually, at this point, banned from being on media. My wife and I have been in the limo on the way to do a CNN show, and they contacted me while I was in the limo. My phone rang. I talked to her as a producer, said, tell the driver to take you home. That's happened several times, and this came as a result of me being on CNN with Carol Costello. One day we did, I forget how many interviews, and one day Rush Limbaugh had me on, Carol Costello. I was doing probably 10 different media shows, including Laura Ingraham. And once they heard what I was saying, they didn't want to hear it anymore, unless it was Laura Ingraham or Rush Limbaugh. Rush was actually saying they don't know on CNN who they have there. This guy's not one of them. And so when I said on CNN that Bruce Jenner is sort of like a drunk who went to a bar, is enjoying himself, and a few years later he's going to wake up from the hangover and go, what did I do? From that point on, I was banned from television. So there you go.
Are you surprised?
Not a bit.
Glenn, do you want to comment on this? Because are you still allowed on air? Did they still invite you on TV shows? Because, I mean, we've got a list of all the shows you've appeared on. Are you allowed near MSNBC and CNN? And I mean, you got some whack job theories.
Still waiting for the calls. No, actually, I got to be 2 times on the Dr. Phil show, and both of them were about this issue. And Dr. Phil actually called Focus on the Family because they wanted somebody to come on and basically say what he wanted to say, which is, this is an issue of great, great concern, these young children with gender dysphoria. So they had me come on, and they got hammered that they would have this bigoted individual come on who doesn't know anything about these issues. Kind of like Walt. I mean, your experience is not your experience if it's the wrong experience. And so, I mean, they will just assault you. And that's what happened to me with the Dr. Phil thing. It was pretty remarkable. But I was impressed with Dr. Phil. He's a stand-up guy. He's a good guy. He's a real deal.
Yeah, I was scheduled to be on Dr. Phil and got canceled, so you were lucky.
I was lucky.
So I'd like to put this to all of you, actually, because you're all battling, I guess what you could call a public ideology. Amanda with the euthanasia things, Jane with the number of issues that you're covering, and with the sexualisation, the whole media coverage. The question from Clark is, there seems to be so much said today that is 180 degrees different to what we hear and read in the media. This is a key bit. How do we bring balance to the media messaging around some of these key issues? And I want to ask all 5 of you, because you're all passionate about different causes, and so you're all subject to the same media approach. You want to start down the end, Wendy?
Well, one of the things I would say is that Christians need to get more involved in social media, and you need to start writing letters to the editor, because if 1 or 2 are, then it can be disregarded. But if the newspapers put in something all about, the transgender, the wonderful transgender movement, and they get a flood of letters to the editor speaking truth, then they're going to put in some of those letters. So we need to not give up. I think sometimes, particularly with the advertising and everything, there's been times when I've thought, what is the use? We just keep on trying and we're not getting anywhere. We can't give up. We can't afford to be that. We can't afford to be people who give up. So get more involved in social media, get your voice out there. We don't need to go through mainstream media anymore. We've got social media, and we can take over that. We can take control of that.
It's pretty tricky, isn't it? I guess personally what I've done is I've taken a tack that isn't rested on Christian messaging. Now, rightly or wrongly, you can lynch me after, but I don't need to, because I have so much experience, I guess, and hear the voice of people in my head that I can use. But what I have done is just sort of bitten the bullet and put myself out and done a whole lot of public evenings, and just whoever came. And I guess it's building momentum right from one person. The story of the man walking along the beach with the starfish. I think about that a lot, one starfish at a time. So that's the tack I've taken. And then I always look for opportunities. And then when you go to and present at one meeting, you get talking and someone else invites you to something else. So, yeah, I've taken a pretty sort of grassroots tack, I think.
Well, I've been very fortunate in that whether it's, I've just finished 3 or 4 documentary films this year. I've been on Russian television. I've been on television around the world, and my articles which I write for the publicdiscourse.com. You can check out that site. And the federalist.com, which both Glenn and I write for. I've had articles there that have been shared 1 million times. And the video that I talked about this morning has been shared looked at over 7 million times. So I happen to have a very good exposure without going on national TV. So I'm very fortunate in that respect. And so we're actually making headway. And I think we calculated one year we reached over 300 million people around the world in 1 year. So that's pretty awesome.
Everything they've said. I guess to add, just never say no to anything. Anytime the media calls, I'll always answer their questions. And they don't often call, but they sometimes do. And just feeling comfortable talking about these issues. I know I've talked to so many people who on euthanasia or abortion will feel like, I couldn't possibly talk about this with people I don't know. Learn enough to feel comfortable talking about it. Call in to talk back, write in on comments, share stuff. Don't be afraid of these issues. They're not going to go away, and the other side's not afraid at all to talk about it. So just don't be afraid.
And pick 1, 2 issues that you particularly are passionate about, because your passion is what will drive you. And I would say that Ryan said it, if you don't stand up and speak, somebody less able than you or polished than you will speak up. Be that person that is polished. Be that person that is contrary to what they think you are. What I mean by that is, okay, I'm the guy from Focus on the Family. My colleague Wayne here, who heads up Focus New Zealand, they know what we're going to be. I've only read the Bible, that's all I know. No, be well-read, articulate, be self-deprecating, be funny, the funny person that you are, but be passionate about your issue and know it and speak of it well and speak up. The other thing, and I'll just end with this, is study other people who, if your issue is pornography and you listen to Wendy and like, oh my goodness, she did such a good job. I wish I could do what she did. Study what she does. What was impressive about it? When you hear an individual on a talk show and you think, gosh, that was so good, write little notes down and think, okay, I can say it just like they said it. Study what works, study what impresses you, and then just learn to be able to do that. That's what I did, and look where it got me. So,
Wendy, can I ask you a question? We asked this last year and I almost didn't get out of the building alive, but I do want to ask it again, and it's about the whole sexualisation thing and the demand for porn, etc. The statement is that men have to front up and take responsibility for this, and I have no problem with that. As you know, I attend the conferences being the first to stand up and say men need to say no to porn, but there seems to be also a role for women to play as well, because there is a huge amount of supply of pornography that is being put out there by women. I just have to say the name Kim Kardashian to back that up. So I'm interested just to hear your comment, as in, is there a call for women to be part of the solution for this? I mean, when you talk about pornography and the problem it is, us men have got a clear message, yes, but do you have a message for women as well, and for women that are feeding the industry? I actually got a question just came through, and I don't know the accuracy of it, so I'll just put it to you, that the majority of those trafficking women are women, according to a 2013 UN study. Now, I'm not sure about the accuracy of that, but I do know that there are plenty of brothel owners that are exploiting vulnerable women for prostitution, and the pimps are women. So can I just put that question to you? What role do women have? Do they have a role in this, or is it all about men having to step up?
Yeah, I'd be surprised about that UN quote, but I'll look into it. I haven't heard that myself. But can I, if I have, and I hope I haven't, but this is not just a men issue. This is not men are bad, women aren't. This is not in any way to shame men. And can I say that men and women, a lot of what we've heard about today is the fact that men and women are created differently. And so men are created with a different sex drive than women. And men are created that when they see an image of a woman, their brain does weird things that I will never understand, because my brain does not do what a man's brain does. And so I believe that women have a great responsibility in the attempt to have a pure understanding of both men and women. And I think even in the way we as women dress, I think in the way that we as women treat men, the way we as women bring up our sons and our daughters, that all plays into it. But when it comes down to it, we have individual responsibilities. And the overwhelmingly predominant aspect of pornography is men abusing women. That is the truth. But and I would say that many of the women who are in pornography in those scenes are actually victims. I don't see them as being the perpetrators. I actually wish I could go into every pornography studio and rescue those women. But at the same time, I agree. Men and women have both responsibility, and certainly I think women need to try and understand the man brain as well as we can as well, and to help. I don't know whether that is, has anyone else got anything better than me to say on that? I do, yep.
Yeah, if I could add to that just from a completely different perspective. A good bit of the work that I've been doing lately at Focus on the Family is anthropology. What is it, humans, how do they organize their lives, and why did the family develop anthropologically, apart from a biblical point of view? The member of Parliament this morning said that marriage was a religious institution. It's not. Because you have marriage existing everywhere in the world. Other places that religion never went to. And here's the anthropological part, is that Margaret Mead and other anthropologists have talked about this, is that in all human civilizations, women are the gatekeepers of sexuality. They manage the door. In no society whatsoever, and this is why our society is so problematic, in no society do you honor the man who just goes after and gets sex without the woman's consent. There is a social taboo about that in every culture. But unfortunately, we're moving away from that. And we need to understand, women need to understand, that it's not your responsibility, but it is your power to say, if you want access to women, we are kind of creating a what is it called in the gas and oil industry?
We have no idea where you're going with this.
It's, everybody's banding together and going to set the price. Cartel, there you go. Thank you.
Gee, cartel, Glenn.
I just was wondering, where is the gas and oil industry coming into this?
It's economic.
Okay, next question. All right. Sorry.
But it is important for women to understand that you have tremendous power there. And that our young women do not have to say men are going to set the price and the tone for sexuality. That if you want to be into pornography, I'm going to have to start reading the women's magazines to learn how to compete. I mean, I think about my dad. If he had done that, my mom would have, she wore the pants in the family.
Yeah.
And she would have told my dad what for. Women need to understand, no, we have great, tremendous power and influence here. And again, it's not your responsibility, but you're very powerful players in the game. As a man, I can tell you that. I mean, it's remarkable.
And I'm not Catholic, but the Catholic understanding of when we removed responsibility from sex, when we had the pill and the whole 60s revolution, we actually removed the concept of sex and responsibility. And so now sex is just an entertainment, it's just a plaything. So we have removed that sense of being together for life, man and woman, yeah.
And that's just real quick, anthropologically, that term matrimony. Break it down, matrilineal, maternal, and then moni, that suffix is support. matrimony is the man needs to commit himself and exclude himself from all other women to commit himself to the woman that he has had sex with and that has produced his child, to provide and supply for her. That's what matrimony is. Taking the man off the sexual market and say, here's your home, here's where you need to pay attention to. That's remarkable.
Well, there was a question on bans on gay conversion therapy and what you thought of them, but also I wanted to expand that also to your experience in Chile. Do you just want to tell the audience about the law there and just, you know, how the whole expansion about conversion therapy and the ban on that?
Right. Recently I was in Santiago, Chile, sent by ADF, which is a law firm in the U.S., I guess worldwide, to speak to their Congress there because they have a law, Chilean law, that if someone changes gender like I did, it's against the law for them to detransition. They have made it so that once you change, it is impossible for you to regain, you come back to the gender that God actually gives you. Instead of living in the fake gender, you can't come back to the real one. So I was there to address that issue and was shocked, really, to find out that that was the case. And so what's so troubling about that, Bob, is that what we found is that with the comorbid disorders that I talked about, whether it's body dysmorphic disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all these different disorders that are the subject of people having the desire to change genders because that's what's driving their desire in many cases, or sexual abuse, they need psychotherapy. So what the advocates have found is really helpful for them is to prevent you to have access to psychotherapy so that you stay the way you are. And so we call it, you know, stay transgender, a stay transgender law, which is what they want. And so this is what I think is one of the most important things today, is that they're trying to prevent children and adults as well from having access to effective, positive psychotherapy to help them detransition, which is what I do without having a license.
Did you want to comment on that, Glenn? No. Okay. Amanda, question says, I'm a health professional. What do you think of advanced care plans? Are these leading down a slippery slope?
That's interesting. I guess the first thing I'd say is palliative care and advanced care planning get linked a lot, but they, again, this is my personal feeling, advanced care planning is a public health issue, a public health initiative. So what it is you write your wishes in a more formal way, and in New Zealand it's a legal document. So it's things about do not resuscitate me, do not give me antibiotics, but it goes further in the documents that we use. It's what's meaningful for me, what do I want my family to know about me? And I've read some beautiful advanced care plans, very specific, and really a gift to your family because it takes a lot of the stress out of what to do when your loved one can't speak for themselves anymore. So that's the key thing. Advanced care planning is when your loved one no longer can speak for themselves. So it's their voice then. And I guess the key thing for me is it's about the conversations, not the document. So it's really a catalyst, a piece of paper, a catalyst to bring your family together and discuss your wishes. It doesn't really matter if a document follows or not, in my mind. And it's more important when you have family conflict. So if you have a family that's all on the same page and everybody knows what Granddad wants and there's no issues, then an advanced care plan, it could be helpful or it could be not. It's imperative when you've got family conflict because the voice then gets lost in the conflict. But if the voice is captured in a document, then it can be utilised. So I don't think it's a slippery slope as long as it's done well and as long as it brings families together to have the conversation. I'm interested that the Voluntary Euthanasia Society seems to have latched on to advanced directives particularly, and I'm not sure where that's heading. but that's not. I think the hope in that is that if people write that they want euthanasia as a directive, that it will be enacted when that person no longer can speak for themselves. I think that's where that direction's headed. But from a purely public health point of view, that's what an advanced care plan is. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Yes.
Jane, I'll just combine two questions here. One says, how do we let Simon Bridges know that gay marriage, transgender issues, anti-smacking law, prison issues are still an issue for us? And then somebody else has asked, where are the national MPs who are pro-life and pro-family? Why aren't they speaking up louder? So I guess it's engagement with politicians. What would you recommend? I mean, to their credit, to have those four MPs here and to stay, they didn't just shoot through when Simon Bridges left, was a commitment and an openness to what was being said. So, I mean, that's a positive.
Yeah. With any MP, talking to them and being out there. Whenever they put up their billboards that say, we're doing a public meeting, go to the public meeting. They usually see the same 30 or 40 people at these things, and those people's concerns become their concerns, because I think that's what their constituency wants, because that's who they're constantly hearing from. They won't know what people want unless you tell them, unless you email their constituency, unless you write them a letter. Write them a letter. They never get letters anymore. They will notice a letter. Their staff will notice a letter and show it to them. Go and visit them. Talk to them when they do have these meetings and things. That's how they know that these are issues. Really, for the Conservatives in New Zealand, Conservative with a small c, not necessarily Conservative Party, that voice is disjointed in a lot of ways. It's not unified. I know, talking to MPs, that they don't really see it as a block that they have to attract or to get. Show them that they're wrong. Show them that there are particular issues that are vote losers. I can't tell you the number of MPs who will tell me that things like euthanasia or abortion, it doesn't really matter how they vote because no one votes accordingly. So they know that if they vote a way that their constituents wouldn't like on that issue, it's not going to matter when it comes to the election. Show them that they're wrong, that you will walk away if they vote in particular ways on particular issues. When it comes to where are the pro-life MPs and why aren't they speaking up, well, it's really, really hard to speak up. It's really, really hard to go against the grain. I mean, as many of us know, if you say particular things in the media or in public, you're going to be attacked. No one's going to agree with you. I can think the example that comes so prominently to mind is back during the election campaign, Simon O'Connor put on his Facebook page a comment about how he thought it was ironic that Jacinda Ardern cried over the shoes of suicide victims and yet supported assisted suicide. He got blasted in the press. There were at least 3 major op-eds by major political journalists that trashed him all over the place, saying what an idiot he was. Maybe he just lost the election. It's hard to stand up. It's hard to say things. So when they do, I know from talking with Simon O'Connor that he did actually, outside of the media, got a lot of support for those comments. He got a lot of emails and letters and people coming up to him and saying, thank you for saying that. He wasn't saying anything different than the NZMA, for instance, said in their submission on assisted suicide and euthanasia. So when they do speak up, support them, thank them. When you hear a politician say something that you agree with, write them a quick note and just say thank you for that. When they vote the way that you like, write them a note and say thanks for doing that. Show them support, because you know that they're going to get blasted in the press. So they need the support. They're people too. And they don't like being attacked, and they don't like being called idiots. So show them that there are people who don't think they are.
I'll just make a comment. I met with an MP just after the vote who voted against, but I wanted to speak with her. And she said she voted against because she has a big group of disability constituents who had told her to vote no, and that she actually would have voted yes otherwise. So the power of your constituents telling you what they want, I thought that was quite amazing.
Right, just in our final 2 minutes, I'd like to go down the line, and I'm going to wind the question out so you can think of your answer, because I want to basically give you 1 minute to encourage these folks, because and what you would say to them in terms of the issue that you're representing, but also just advice and encouragement, because here today are a whole lot of people who are concerned about all the issues that you represent. They want to know how to respond. They really, it's not about just leaving here and doing nothing. I think everybody is saying under their breath, what can I do? What are you asking me to do? So I want to put that question to you. What's your word of advice? What's your word of encouragement? Who's got the fastest brain on the... It's definitely not Glenn or Walt. So we'll start with
I was going to say,
Wendy.
definitely not me. And I don't have the fastest brain. But, we sing that song, Break My Heart for What Breaks Yours. And it was said before, we can't all be across every issue. Bob and my job is to be across every issue. And so that's our job. But when you are running a family or you've got your own business to run, you can't be across every issue, but you can have an opinion on every issue, and then you can act on what God has placed on your heart as your passion. And whether that's euthanasia or abortion or it's pornography, follow God's leading as to what He's placing on your heart, and then don't walk past things and just think, I can't do it today. Be consistent. But I would say ask God to place on your heart what it is that He wants you to actually be involved in.
I would say about the euthanasia issue, just a few very quietly spoken questions to a person that you're talking to who agrees with euthanasia, like, do you think that people really can't be coerced? Or do you think that... what's another one? That it won't harm families in some way. So just, I have this slight bragging moment where I can plant seeds of doubt in 30 seconds in most people. Not the activists, but in most middle New Zealand, you can actually plant a couple of seeds with a few well-placed questions, and that's all that you might have time to do, and that's okay. Because they haven't thought deeply about these issues in the most part.
Yeah, I think in the transgender world, it's just most important for us to understand that these are broken individuals. They're suffering from something that has happened to them. And while I don't ever do psychotherapy, I do help them discover where that hurt came from. And I think it's important for us to understand that when we're affirming someone in a cross-gender identity, we are telling them there's something wrong with who they really are. And I think that, to me, is one of the most painful things that we can think about, when you're literally telling somebody there's something wrong with you and you need to be here rather than who you are. And so once I have the opportunity to meet with people who are really needing help, and we can identify where that pain and hurt came from, and that's at the point to where they themselves get the aha moment and go, okay, I understand now what happened. And they feel free to detransition in many cases.
I would say don't lose hope. With euthanasia, since 2015, when Lucretia Seals came up, yes, 2 countries have passed euthanasia laws. Colombia didn't pass a law, but their health ministry put in regulations in Canada, and 2 U.S. states, Colorado and California, have passed laws. But in that same time, 4 countries, 25 U.S. states, and 3 Australian states have all defeated legislation. It does more often get defeated than passed, even in the most liberal of places. It gets defeated. Abortion law reform was tried in Queensland last year, 2 bills, both defeated. These things get defeated all the time. The media doesn't report on that, but it happens. Do not lose hope.
That's very good, and I would like to piggyback on what Amanda had said. And I mean, one, you can't and Wendy said this, you can't do everything, but pick 1 or 2 issues that you're passionate about. Pick the issue. 1, do your homework. You don't have to become a PhD on the issue, but this is what Amanda said is, think up 3 good points that register doubt in the advocate from the other side. And if you don't know, like on Amanda's issue, on Jane's issue, call the expert and say, help me understand the 3 most persuasive points that I just need to remember and know. A lot of times that's what I do on an issue. There's just 6 things that you have to know. You don't have to know everything, but just know these 6 or 4 or 3 things. And then speak out. Speak out. Go to the meetings. They do see the same people at these meetings all the time. And they will notice you sitting over here on the corner like, oh, wow, that's not a person I've seen before. And the cool thing about it is you may think, well, what influence do I have? I'm just a regular person. Regular people are the ones that have the influence. They really do. You know what? I work full-time on a job. I work on the docks. I have grease on my hand from fixing engines. But I came here tonight for this issue. The politician is going to pay tremendous attention to you because you don't get paid to do this kind of stuff. You're not a professional lobbyist. You're just a concerned citizen. And most politicians will appreciate that kind of public involvement process. And so do speak out. Pick your issue, do your homework, just know 3 talking points, and then go to these meetings, let your voice be heard, and speak out. You're a citizen, you have that right.
One of the interesting things was that as Simon Bridges left this morning, you wouldn't have seen it, but he was interviewed by One News, so I'll be interested to see the coverage. But basically the interview question was basically, what are you doing here? Why are you hanging out with Family First and these you gooks? So that was what he was being tackled on as he left. So that's kind of the hostility that can come out, but that's okay. My 2 statements that I would leave you with is we won't win every battle, but we'll lose every battle if we don't show up. And the second one is, to quote Billy Graham, he said, when a brave person takes a stand, it stiffens the spines of others. And I don't know about you, but I think your spines have probably been stiffened because of these 5 brave people speaking. It's your job now to go out and stiffen the spines of others simply by speaking some of those facts. These 5 have been unbelievably supportive, fantastic. As I said, 2 of them were yesterday with the pastors. 80 pastors were in this room yesterday, so they've had a full-on time. Could you thank them, please, for being in New Zealand and for supporting us?